Welcome back to Actionable Intelligence. I'm Eric Greitens. This is the show that respects your intelligence. We honor you as a citizen, and we are proud to bring you strong voices rooted in history and the Constitution that too often are ignored by the mainstream media. And we're joined now by my good friend, Dr. Ralph Reed. He's the chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition and the author of the book For God and Country. He joins us from Georgia. Ralph, it's great to see you.
Thank you so much, Eric. Good to be with you again.
Absolutely. Ralph, you've got a new op-ed out in the Christian Post titled, "Did Evangelicals Swing to Biden? Not Hardly." Give our viewers an update on what happened with the evangelical vote.
Sure, Eric. 4 years ago, Donald Trump 1% of the evangelical vote. It was the highest figure ever won by a presidential candidate of either party. And obviously, there was a lot of interest in how they would do in 2020 because they were such a critical part of his victory in 2016. Some who are claiming, based on the network exit poll, that Trump didn't do as well and Biden did a lot better. But that's not backed up by our survey. We commissioned a post-election survey by Public Opinion Strategies, one of the most respected polling firms in America. They show the president winning 81% of the self-identified evangelical vote again, and they show Biden only winning 14%, which is less than Hillary won. Now, that's our poll. You don't have to believe our poll, but then there was another survey, a massive national exit poll conducted by the Associated Press, not exactly a conservative media outlet.
Right.
And they found that Trump won 81% of the evangelical vote. And why is that important? It's because that group cast 28% of all the votes cast on Election Day. Mm-hmm. That's bigger than the African American vote, the Union vote, and the Hispanic vote combined. And it was even larger in some of the critical states, 34% of the vote in North Carolina, 32% of the vote in Ohio, about the same in Texas. And if you combine it with Trump splitting the Catholic vote and winning the frequently mass attending Catholic vote, roughly 2-1, it was voters of faith that kept the president as close as he was in every one of those battleground states. And it was voters of faith that enabled the Republicans to hold the Senate, at least so far. We have two critical runoffs on January 5th, in an election where the Democrats thought they had a very good chance of picking up, perhaps, if you can believe it, as many as 10 Senate seats, and to date they've only picked up one. And of course, Republicans have won so far, I think it's 12 or 13 House seats, and it may go higher. So voters of faith were loyal to Trump, they were loyal to the pro-life cause, and they're the reason why the Republicans did as well as they did on Election Day.
Absolutely. And I want to come to the Georgia runoff elections in just a moment. You've been on the front lines of this, Ralph, for decades now. Give our viewers your sense for why it is that evangelical voters not only supported Trump, but why they've really left the Democratic Party.
Well, there are many reasons, but I think the most important reason, the central reason, is the issue of life. Donald Trump is the most pro-life president in American history. There's no question about it. No other president had ever been willing to do, and that was he defunded Planned Parenthood under the Title X family planning program. This is a program that basically counsels young women in planning their families, and for decades, the number one recipient of that program was Planned Parenthood, which was using the program to encourage, promote, and perform abortions. He was also the first president to ever speak at the March for Life. And then another big issue, related, but not just the single issue of abortion, is the federal courts. Mm-hmm. And here again, Donald Trump and the Republican Party have been the champions. I mean, President Trump appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, 56 or 7 appellate court judges, and over 200 total federal judges. And he wanted them to be young, he wanted them to be conservative, and he wanted them to be pro-life. And if you look at the other side, the Democratic Party that I grew up seeing in Georgia, in my home state, and that you grew up in your home state of Missouri, is unrecognizable today.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, they're abortion on demand, paid for with tax dollars, as an entitlement program and a socialistic health care plan up through the moment of birth, partial birth abortion, pain-capable abortion, late-term abortion, taxpayer-funded abortion. And when you combine that with what they did to Brett Kavanaugh, their hostility to religious freedom, you know, conservative people of faith are finding a very hard time finding a home in the Democratic Party anymore, Eric.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things I wanna pick up on there is that President Trump has been willing to do a lot of things that Republicans in the past had promised to do, but actually hadn't done. You know, you and I had talked before about the president's support for the state of Israel, and just like his support for the pro-life movement, he was willing to do things like move the American embassy to Jerusalem, even in contravention to and some opposition from some people in the Republican foreign policy establishment. He's really been willing to do those bold things. Now, Ralph, you've been on the front lines also of Georgia politics for a long time. The whole country right now is focused on Georgia. Give us a sense for what you and your organization are doing in these Georgia runoff elections and why they're so important.
Well, I'm a former college Republican state chairman here. I'm a former state Republican Party chairman here. I've helped run statewide campaigns in Georgia going back, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but going back to the late 70s. So I know the state very well. My organization, Faith and Freedom, has identified 1.45 million evangelical and pro-life Christians in the state. That's about a third of the vote, a little over a third of the vote. 5 million votes cast on November 3rd. That's a record. And we're contacting those Christian voters to get them back out on January 5th. We're knocking on 500,000 doors minimum. We hope to get north of that. We're making over 1 million get out the vote calls. We're dropping 1.5 million pieces of voter education literature to their households. We're sending out 2 to 2.5 million text messages. And by the way, those million phone calls, those are not robocalls. These are volunteers who are actually calling voters and talking to them either on their cell phone or their home or work phone. And then in addition to that, we've got a whole digital and social media campaign, and we're mobilizing 5,500 churches to distribute over 1 million educational voter guides and make sure every member of their church votes either early or on January 5th. And if we do our job, even as Donald Trump apparently, I say apparently because there's still litigation going on, even if you believe the current vote total in Georgia, where the president came up about 11,700 votes short in 5 million votes, on the same day, David Perdue led John Ossoff by 88,000 votes. And so if we do our job and we get those voters back out, we'll see both of these outstanding U.S. senators return to the Senate on January 5th.
And Ralph, I just want to affirm, from my own experience, that having people who are making those personal phone calls as opposed to a robocall makes a tremendous difference. You guys have been out there with this ground game, actually having people in touch with their friends, their neighbors, with family members, with relatives, to actually connect to them. Talk, if you would, about what's at stake, though, for people of faith around the country and how they can help to make sure that that faith and freedom are protected in these runoff votes in Georgia.
Well, it's a great question, Eric. And one of the great things about the technology of the internet era we've put together an app that people can either download on their mobile phone or we can email it to them. So they can go to our website, which is ffcoalition.com. That's FF as in Faith and Freedom, coalition.com. And there's a volunteer intake form. And people can either come to Georgia and knock on doors, and believe it or not, we have hundreds of them who have come from around the country to come to Georgia. They're knocking on doors even as I speak. We have 856 volunteers making calls or knocking on doors. If they can't come to Georgia, that's okay. They can still call these voters. Again, going to the same website, ffcoalition.com, there's a volunteer intake form. They can say either A, I want to come to Georgia and knock on doors over the Christmas holidays. If they want to do that, we can provide lodging and transportation. If they want to make phone calls, they can do it from anywhere in the country. And they just check that. We email them the software. We provide them with a data set. And look, even if you're only making 10 or 20 calls to Georgia Christian pro-life voters, I think the key to victory is to have a lot of people do a little. We don't want to have a little people having to do a lot. Right. We want a big army. We're on our way to 1,000 paid volunteers. It's historic. It's groundbreaking. We're going to crush this thing. We're going to see the biggest turnout of conservative and Christian voters in Georgia in its history. And we're going to teach a lesson to the radical left that Georgia is not New York, California, or Illinois.
That's right. Well, folks, that's Dr. Ralph Reed. It's ffcoalition.com where you can find him there. That's the Faith and Freedom Coalition. And we will be back tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Dr. Gina coming up right now.